We did it. That is the end of the game. All right. So, first things first. The bottom center of the screen says that we've beaten 6 games in 2024 and 453 since we started doing this in 2020. Those numbers are now incorrect. We have now beaten 7 games in 2024 and 454 since we started doing this in 2020. Let's go. All right. I have some thoughts. Let's talk about God of War Ragnarok. You know, first thing I want to say is that when I realized that it was over, just a moment ago, when I realized that it was over and that I was going to have to say goodbye to these characters, I was genuinely sad. I'm not sure I've ever felt that way in a video game before. So let's talk about the good things first. I guess overall good thing here is that this is one of the best games I've ever played. No surprise, right? I heard from a lot of people that it was going to be very good. But the 2018 game didn't really wow me until really late in the game because I went in with such high expectations that it would have been pretty much impossible to do that. But I think I ranked God of War 23rd or something all time. Is it high 20s? Or low 20s. So very good, but not like top 10, right? And so I went into this game expecting to like it about as much. I liked this game way more than the first one. I thought it was just objectively superior. And I'll tell you why. The story. In the first game, there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of introductions. There's a lot of back and forth that, was good. But it really, the original story focuses really very tightly on Kratos and Atreus, right? It's very much a story about this father trying to figure out how to be a father, right? To his son and all that stuff. And that was great. That was excellent. That was very good, especially toward the end. And all that stuff about trying to protect him and all the stuff from Boulder and all that stuff. So that was all great. But this game has so much more scope. I mean, there's so many more important characters, interesting characters. There's so much more of the world that you see, even just playing the main quests like I did. The story is about so much more than just a father, Kratos trying to learn to be a father. There's a lot more going on in a lot of different camps when it comes to all the different characters. So I'm trying to keep it I'm trying not to go into too many details, but the scope of the story was not only much larger, but and Thor and Odin and all that stuff. I mean, like, there's so many good characters in this game. Well acted, well voiced. I mean, well acted doesn't really cut it. It was for a video game, god tier acting and writing. I mean, this is like if they made this this was just a movie and they took the scenes shot for shot and all the voice acting shot for shot and just made it live action instead, like, this is like Oscar-worthy shit. In my opinion, honestly, this is as good an acting as you get in any movie, any really good movie. So, not just the acting, but the story. They had so much to work with. All these different conflicts between all these different characters, and getting to see so many different sides of the story. It was way more interesting to me than the first one was, and immediately interesting. The first one I really didn't care that much about until 3/4 of the way through. It was when it really started to get good for me. This one was immediate. And it's just, and it never really slows down. It is riveting from start to finish. So that's number one. The story is among the very, very best I have ever seen in a video game. Maybe the best. Maybe the best story I have ever experienced in a game. I cannot... When I think of games that I think of like they have the fucking best story, I think of The Last of Us 1 and 2. I think of Ghost of Tsushima. I think of Horizon Zero Dawn. Those are the first ones that pop into my head, right? And Honestly, I don't know, man. I can't. I think Horizon Zero Dawn is in the same league. I think The Last of Us 1 is in the same league. But is this one might be the best video game story I've ever experienced. This is probably the only game ever made that I've ever played all the way through and beaten that I could say I could just watch the cutscenes and be perfectly entertained. You just like one of those YouTube where they cut together just the cutscenes. I might tell my wife to watch that. Like, it's so good, just cutscenes, you know. And the way that they interweave the gameplay with that, I mean, that's all genius too. But anyway, so the story's amazing. So that's one. I had some big problems, well, moderate, medium-sized problems with the first game. I didn't think that the loot grind really amounted to much. It seemed like it was more built for end game or late game, or you know, it wasn't that satisfying. It was kind of confusing and sparse somehow. This game has somehow managed to make the gear progression in this game more complex, more interesting, and somehow easier to understand. I just cared more. I cared about upgrading different enchantments more, and not as much as somebody that's like knee deep in this game for 200 hours, but like I had my brain wrapped around it, and I was paying attention, and I understood it. And when I got a piece of gear out of a chest, I was like, oh shit, this is good. You know, like it mattered. It had weight. It mattered to me. I cared a lot more about it. It was just better. And that's the fact that it just looked so good on the characters too is just icing on the cake. You know, you upgrade Kratos' gear. You don't even change the gear. You just upgrade it, and then it just looks cooler, like it's got more inlays on it and stuff. I loved that stuff. So I thought that was a vast improvement. All that stuff. That was my only real complaint for the first game, is I didn't care that much about the gear. That was definitely different. They fixed that for me. I can't quantify exactly why. I think it's just, I think the UI had some small tweaks to it that just made it more intuitive and more engaging. And, I think the pacing of the gear, finding it was more, it was less spread out. It was more, periodic, like, you didn't go too long without finding something, but you didn't usually find something immediately after the previous thing. You know, it was well spaced. So those are the big, and then, you know, the gameplay is God tier, definitely. I mean, the actual combat is the best version of God of War, easily. I mean, I can tell you right now, without even having to look at my ranking sheets, this is my favorite God of War game. Not only that, this is one of my favorite video games ever. Now, let's get into that a little bit, because the way I'm talking, you might think, oh, is this number one ever? And the answer is no. It's not number one ever. Number one right now is The Last of Us 2. Number 2 is Sekiro. Number 3 is Elden Ring. And number 4 is Resident Evil 4 Remake. Number 5 is Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds is a little bit of a wild card, but let's look at those other 4 games. The Last of Us 2, Sekiro, Elden Ring, and Resident Evil. So, there is something... So those games... The only one that story really matters is The Last of Us 2. I don't care about the story in Elden Ring. I don't care about the story in Sekiro. I don't care about the story in Resident Evil 4 either that much. It's just window dressing for the combat. What really made all of 4 of those games great was this awesome combination. Well, let me back that up a little bit. The Souls-likes, they're just kind of their own thing, right? So that's all about the combat. For Elden Ring, it was a little bit about the open world, but I love Souls-like combat when it's done well, and those 2 games are the best Souls-like combat there is. So that's a kind of a whole different thing. I love that kind of combat. I will always probably love that kind of combat more than hack and slash combat. It's just, it's slower, it's more deliberate, it's more challenging. It's just, there are probably 15 boss fights in Sekiro that I liked more than any boss fight in this game. So just the combat is why those are so high. For Souls-likes, it's just combat, really. Now, The Last of Us 2 and Resident Evil are different. The Resident Evil, it's about resource management and combat, and horror, which I like. And so it's a perfect combination of that. And then The Last of Us 2, it's a combination of the awesome, awesome, awesome story, the awesome combat, and some resource management too, because it's got a little bit of survival horror stuff in it too, right? And all of those systems in all of those games is perfect. This is the point that I'm trying to get to. All of those games have a have one common thread, and that is that the combat is pristine. In the Souls-likes, it's just we've already talked about that. That's just those are the best examples of Souls-like combat. In Sekiro especially, it's so fucking good, right? In Resident Evil, all that resource management, survival horror stuff where you have to watch where your bullets and you got to shoot for the head and you got to make sure you're managing your shotgun shells and all that stuff. Resident Evil 4 is the best example of that, or one of them. It's one of the best examples of that. The original Evil Within, I think, is another good one, but I beat that before 2020, so that one's not ranked. The Last of Us 2, again, it's the combat. People, a lot, when I ranked Last of Us 2 #1, a lot of people asked me, like, oh, is it because of the story and the woke or whatever? I like all that stuff. And I think that I am a defender of that story. I think it's a gorgeous story and all that stuff, but it's not really why it's #1. The reason The Last of Us 2 is #1 is it's the only game I've ever played where killing someone actually felt like murder. There's something about the combat in that game, especially the stealth combat. When you are sneaking around behind people's backs and slitting their throats, it is so weighty and so visceral, it has never been matched. Which is, and it's not even in the first one. Of course, I've heard they, put that in the Part 1 remaster or whatever, so maybe I'll play that one of these days, but that is why Last of Us 2 is #1, is the combat. When I think of the best parts of that game, I just think I'm Ellie and I'm in the tall grass and I've got to throw a fucking bomb and kill a dog and then jump on someone's back and slit their throat and fucking move on to the next person and hit them with a machete. Like that kind of stuff it's so fucking visceral. It's so perfect and it's so just intense. That is the only thing about this game that I don't think is perfect. And it's not an objective thing. It's a preference thing. The hack and slash combat in this game, where you're just fucking taking out 10, 20 people at a time, swinging your axe in every direction, doing all kinds of moves. And all the moves are really cool. All the cooldown stuff and all the abilities. It's well balanced. It's all perfect for what it is. But it will never be as satisfying to me as The Last of Us. That kind of combat just won't ever be as satisfying to me. Same with Souls-likes. This kind of combat just will never be as satisfying. The worst part of this game is probably the combat, which is saying something, because the combat's kind of perfect. It's just my least favorite thing about the game. Everything else about the game is exactly what I'm looking for. This kind of combat is just a hair off ideal for me. That just the hack and slash combat in general. So that is the only reason that this isn't going to break the top 5, probably. What I do think it reminds me a lot of is Horizon Zero Dawn, because much like Horizon Zero Dawn, this game has excellent combat, but it's not exactly the kind of combat that I'm comfortable with and really love. And it's got an amazing story, just like Horizon Zero Dawn. So when I think about how much I liked this game, the closest thing I can actually relate it to is Horizon Zero Dawn, because it's got every piece is in the right place. I fucking loved that game. I loved it more than Forbidden West. It's in my top 10 somewhere. So when I think about where this game is going to rank, it's probably going to be somewhere near Horizon Zero Dawn. I think I might like it more than that. Horizon Zero Dawn I have at number 9. I have Ghost of Tsushima at number 8. It's going to be in there somewhere, probably. I think I like the story better than both. Well, I don't know. Ghost of Tsushima story is really good, but those are the games where they're sitting there at 8 and 9, where it's like they're perfect games, they're perfectly put together, and the story is incredible, and they're technical marvels, and they're well acted, and they're well voiced, and the combat is excellent, but it's not my wheelhouse, right? So it's going to end up somewhere near there. I've spoken too long, but the long and short of it is this game is perfect. Is that true? Is there anything wrong with this game? No. No. This game is perfect. This is a perfect game. The first one I did not feel that. The 2018 reboot, I did not feel that way at all. This game is perfect. For what it is. It's perfect for... And no game can be everything. This game is perfect at what it does. And so it's going to rank it very well. And it's just, I mean, even for me personally, I mean, this game's in 5 different ways exactly what I'm looking for. I'm just kind of trying to explain why it's not number 1, even though it blew me away on every level. I mean, honestly, the top 25 games blew me away, you know, so, they can't all be number 1, but yeah, this game is, I mean, it elevates gaming. This is the standard, the 2022 standard. Did this win Game of the Year? Probably didn't. Did it? I don't know whether it did or not. I should look that up. I mean, I don't know. Elden Ring came out that year. Shit. It was a good year. It was a good year for games. All right. That's it. We're done. That went way longer than it should have, but I had a lot. I had a lot to say. Let's go ahead and save. Whenever it gives me the option, I always do. But I don't know why, because we're never going to play this again, probably. God of War Ragnarok, I'm so glad that you have been created and that we got to enjoy you. But we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye.